Today is September 26th, 2012. I'm Teresa Larson, and I am speaking with Delmer Woodward. Thank you for letting me come into your home today, Mr. Woodward.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to make sure that I have your permission to talk to you today and record your voice and your picture.
You have it.
Great. Tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in State Center, Iowa on July 30th, 1920.
And were you born at home?
No, I think I was probably born in the Woods Hospital in State Center, which was on Main Street.
Well, what were your parents engaged in? What was their business in State
Well,
Center at the
my
time?
father, when I was born, was a mechanic in the Model T, Model, and Fords and Tractor days. And then as I grew older, he changed and went into interior decorating.
Mm-hmm. Now, as a young man born in 1920, of course you went to grade school, grammar school, high school.
Went through 12 grades.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have kindergarten.
And did you have a job a lot of that time that you were in school?
Probably when I started, my first job was 10 years old, working in a bakery. And basically I worked in that through the 12th grade. I did work in a butcher shop for about 3 months when they were remodeling the bakery in a new building.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I worked in there from 10 years old, which I would be in about 6th grade, until I graduated.
And were you working just to save money for yourself, or were you helping to contribute to your family?
Well, you could say help
Mm-hmm.
with the family, because I had 4 half-brothers. And when Dad married my mother, she had 4 boys. And with 4 boys, 5 boys would eat quite a little bit. I started out at 5 cents an hour, and day-old bread and day-old buns and rolls or whatever take home, which helped the
Yep.
family.
That was a good side benefit.
Yep.
I'm always interested in how people get to Ames. You must have liked it in State Center, you were doing well, you had a job. How did you get to Ames?
Well, actually, I had 2 brothers living here, and one of them said, well, after I graduated, he says, why don't you come to Ames, I can get you a job. In a pottery, which is called Ames Pottery on East Lincoln Way in Ames, and I worked that summer in the pottery business.
And so how old were you when you worked that?
19.
You were 19 years old. Now, Ames Pottery, I've heard about that. And it was just a summer business, right?
Right. The fellow that's had it lived in Hayes, Kansas. And he would come up here in the summer months and the 3 months, because that was Highway 30 back in those days. So we put our wares out along the curb, and people going through Ames stopped, bought things, plus local people.
And was it pottery that was substantial? I mean, we're talking about it's heavy pottery and
A lot of it, we had what you'd call jardinières, which is pretty big vases.
may I ask how much money you made?
You may. I made $1 a day.
And did it make any difference how many pots you sold? You
Oh,
just
no.
made $1 a day. That
No,
was it.
I wasn't a salesman.
Okay.
We were.
You were constructing the pots.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Right. Whatever it took. I even learned how to use the potter wheel
Okay.
to make vases.
Okay, I'm thinking this is like towards the end of the Depression, 1939, something like that,
Yeah.
maybe? Okay.
Right.
And people had money to buy these big jardinières.
Right. Well, of course, they weren't very expensive. They probably $20 was the highest priced piece we probably had.
And do you remember the colors or what they looked like?
Oh yeah, they was just any color you'd see today, like turquoise, blue, white, green.
Some pretty glazes then for
Yes,
them.
right.
Right. I can picture, though, cars or trucks rumbling on Highway 30, and you have them precariously out there on the edge. Did you ever have any catastrophes?
No, no.
No, you didn't.
No. No, they didn't drive that fast
Oh.
really back in those days.
Okay,
Not like today.
yeah. So, would you have continued that job?
Well, I continued till September. I came over in June and worked all summer. And then I went to work on Main Street. I was stockman for F.W. Woolworth.
I would love to know more about the Woolworth store. Do you remember the address where you first started in the Woolworths? Or roughly?
I'm saying it was 3, 8 or 10. I don't remember. As of today, Pumpkin Patch is in that building.
In that building. So that's where you started as a stock boy.
Stockman. Right.
And were you like first thing in the morning, sweep the floor?
That is right.
Okay.
Come in and sweep the floor, and then, in those days we got freight in by rail or Railway Express.
Tell me a little bit about the merchandise. If you were a stock guy, you would have to tote a lot of different kinds of boxes with a lot of different kinds of things.
Oh yes, if you know what Woolworths had, it's everything from, as we would say, nuts and bolts to thread. Well, some things I wouldn't say that we handled, but yeah, a lot of it. Some things I probably didn't know anything about when I first started there. When the invoice come in, I'd read it and I'd figure out what it was and mark the price on the box and put it in the shelves. So when the girls needed stuff, they would call down and we'd send it up to them.
And would stocking take all day? Was that what your principal
yes.
job all day long?
Well, except when they needed something, of course, I would run up. Otherwise, I was in the basement, probably from 9 o'clock till 5.
That sounds kind of like hard work to me.
No, really wasn't that, because if you remember Woolworths, a lot of small items. So it wasn't,
So it was a lot of movement,
yes,
but maybe not the heavy lifting
not heavy,
kind of
no,
things.
definitely not.
I am guessing that when you first started, we're taking this as roughly 1940-ish, something like that, there are products that you handled in stock that people wouldn't know what they are anymore.
That is probably true.
Can you tell me something?
Well, when you're a 19-year-old kid, of course, by the time I was with Woolworths, I was 20, so, but there was lots and lots of little bitty things. They had different departments. There was a hardware department, there was a housewares department, there was candy department, and a lot of little knick-and-knacks. To this day, I don't remember them all.
Okay, of course.
That's,
So you left the $1 a day job with the Ames pottery. Did you get a bit of a promotion working at
I
Woolworths?
started out with Woolworths at $11 a week. And that was a big jump in wages.
Did you brown bag it? Did you take your lunch to work?
actually, no, because I was living with my sister-in-law and my brother, and my sister-in-law was a cashier, so that's how I got the job, of course. I was able to go to her mother, which lived on Lincoln Way, and I bought my noon meal for 50 cents. And I got a full meal.
And so that would be a meal that that woman was cooking for several different people then.
Well, not really. She only did it
For you?
For me, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that was a pretty good deal.
Oh, yes, it was. I started that when I was in the pottery.
Oh, okay. So that's where you took your meal, your big
Yes.
meal of the day.
Mm-hmm. So $1 a day, and I spent 50 cents for my noon meal. And of course, my brother and sister-in-law didn't charge me any
For rent.
until I got to higher pay.
So I'd like to know more about Woolworth's. Did it have a counter at that time when in the old location? You know, it later had a soda fountain counter. Did they have a counter at that old location?
They had no, they had an ice cream in the summertime. If you remember, they had ice cream sandwiches for probably, I don't remember today, probably a quarter. And then of course they had root beer, Hires root beer. They only used it in that store during the summer months. Then that would out and more universal merchandise would go on that counter.
So I know you were mostly in the stock situation, but did you ever help with, getting the things displayed and getting them kind of looking nice for customers?
In 1942, we had a building at 320, I think it is, that built for Woolworth, and at that time, I was brought out of the basement as assistant manager. Then I helped with the counters, helped changing them, whatever it might be.
How did you learn how to be an assistant manager?
Well, just working with the manager, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me a lot.
Was there a slogan for your store or a concept of how you did your business?
No, it's just the 5 and 10. That's what we always call it, Woolworths 5 and 10.
Mhm.
Of course, there's a lot of merchandise of more than 5 or 10, but a lot of it was 5 and 10. You could buy a spool of thread for a dime back in those days. Today you can't do that, if you can find them.
So, working alongside the manager, what did you learn about, like, how much your store should be open or what you should charge for things or that sort of thing?
Well, normally they would have as far as charging, they would take a percentage of what it cost to make a selling price. They'd work on today you'd say work on a percentage basis.
Did you have many sales?
Oh, yes. Yeah, every once in a while they would, the headquarters would tell you what to do. You do it when they tell you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was seasonable merchandise, like when it comes to Halloween and Christmas and every well, anyhow, the office was in St. Paul, and they would tell us when we had to do things.
Nowadays, you sometimes see Christmas items out by Labor Day. I bet you did not do that.
day after Thanksgiving was the day that we put out Christmas items.
Now, working in retail, your customers are one of the best sources of interesting stories. I mean, there are customers that do crazy things. There are customers that do good things. There are customers that do things that are not necessarily appropriate. Do you have some customer service stories from working in Woolworths?
Well, I don't think so. I can come up with things. They were, of course, you knew your customer by face at Woolworths. You didn't know them by name because they always paid cash. And today's time, you learn them a lot because they give you a check or they give you a card today, which we never knew back in our day. But you knew them by face. They were customers. They didn't. Every Saturday night, we knew the farmers that would come in. So you got to know a lot of people, but not by name, just by face.
And of course, your transactions, as you've already indicated, are a small amount of money. Generally
Right.
speaking, a small amount of money.
Yeah.
So you have to work hard to make money in that store. You have to have a lot of transactions.
Oh yes, that's definitely.
There's got to be a lot going on because they're just small amounts.
That's right. Well, probably in those days, if we had an item was probably $5, that was an expensive item. I remember that we had ties come in, sold for $1.50 to $2.50,
My goodness.
and nice looking ties.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today that would be the nameplate, cost that much for a tie.
And you probably had some strategies for making more sales, like learning how to bundle things.
Oh
or-
yes, especially well at Christmas time we would take different things and make them in, well, we'll say tumblers, for instance. We sold them by the each. Well, maybe we'd put them in a package of 6, and we'd charge a little more money than, because we packaged it Christmassy, so a person could just take it and wrap it, and there it was. So
Sure.
you'd make a little extra at that time, and there's several things that I remember they doing, but right now I can't tell you on.
That's all right. If it comes to, you can. Did you get to know your fellow shop owners and shop managers up and down the street?
Oh yes, up and down the street. They all, that's well, you knew everybody in those days, even though you didn't have meetings like they do today, but they would come in to buy something, and then of course we would reciprocate if we needed something in their department, and so you knew just about everybody.
I just didn't know if you ever had time to have coffee with them or
Very little.
very little.
Very low. In fact, the manager didn't like you because the girls couldn't leave. They didn't want. He didn't leave. So.
You had to stay put too.
They only, yeah, that's right. And of course, you met your neighbors and other through coming in, or you might take off at your lunch hour and go and patronize someplace else.
So you mentioned Saturday nights on Main Street. That was a social time. People would come to town.
Right.
Yeah.
They would.
What was that like? Saturday night on Main Street. Was it
It
fun?
was a busy time. It was a busy time. I usually took my lunch hour from about 5 to 6, and then I would have to go clean up because I'd work the floor in the old store on Saturday night, and done a lot of, if somebody gave a $10 bill, maybe there isn't enough money in the register, so they would holler Department 17, and you go to Department 17, which you know it is, and need change. Okay, I'd run, give them change. And I'd also, usually on a Saturday night, I'd visit the barber shop to have a shave. So I'm looking good because my beard would grow. So you had your hour off, you had to eat and clean up for Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. And then how late were you open on Saturday night?
Usually 10.
Mm-hmm. And Main Street was hopping.
Oh, yes. Yep. In those days, a lot of the farmers would come and park their car in front of your store and visit with the neighbors and of theirs, and wouldn't move their cars for 3 hours. No parking meters.
That's right. So this is like, we're talking kind of early 1940s right now.
40 to 42, because I went in the service in 42, in October of 42. Mm-hmm. And got out in 46. Okay. But that was all. And we moved the store, as I say, in 1942. We started taking the merchandise out of the store in the back and taking it down the alley on a big railroad, well, it was express wagon they had. They would loan it to us. So we got boxes and one would push and one would pull and take it down, unload it, and go back and get another load.
So let's come up to 1946 on Main Street. I should have asked you this. How did you meet your sweetheart? How did you meet your wife?
I met my $1 million baby in the 5 and 10. She would work there on Saturday nights. She used to work at Donnelly's in Nevada. And she'd come in and work Saturday night, all day Saturday and Saturday night.
At Woolworth.
Yeah. And then when we moved in 42 and they brought me in as a assistant manager, believe it or not, she got the assistant cashier job. So, yeah, we had it made.
You both were well employed.
Yeah.
At that point, you had good jobs.
And of course, we got married in 43, and she quit Woolworth. And when I came out of the service in 46, I was with Woolworth for 6 months, and they sent me to Milwaukee. And there, I didn't like it, so I only stayed a little while and quit the company and came back, and that's when I started working in the hardware business with Car Hardware.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because you're still on Main Street.
Yeah, right.
And you're probably still seeing some of the same people in terms of faces.
But then you got to know their name.
Mm-hmm.
Because 9 out of 10 would give you a check.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is the price point's a little bit higher now.
Yes, quite a bit. Of course, the prices changed during the war a lot. And of course, a higher price merchandise. When I got to Car Hardware, because they had just remodeled and went to double store, put in more merchandise.
What was your job with Car Hardware?
I had the, outside of working the whole store, you might say, I had the electrical department and electrical appliances.
How did you learn that trade, or how did you learn about that?
Just had to pick it up from the other help that's been there longer than I had, and first thing they did was give me that counter and said, there's a whole box of merchandise that has just come in and needs to be put on the counter. If there isn't room for it, you have to make room. So I learned it from there.
So you worked for Mr. Rogers at that time?
Yes, I did.
Uh-huh.
I worked there from 46 till 55. August of 55, and I left them, and I went to work for Peterson Hardware.
And you're still on Main Street?
I'm still on Main Street.
And what was Peterson Hardware? Was, of course, you went to a competitor, to Car Hardware, so you left one hardware store.
No, that was a new business.
It was a new business.
New
Okay.
business started up
New business
after I went to work for 'em.
for them. And what was their business idea? How did they set themselves apart?
Well, we call it Peterson Quick Serve. All the merchandise was out where you could see it. Now, Car Hardware, a lot of the merchandise, there might be a door, and the merchandise is behind the door. We'll say they had files or hacksaw blades. Well, you had to ask, said, I need hacksaw blades, and you'd have to pull the door open and get whatever they think they want. But we had all that out in boxes or hanging on the wall.
Actually, your merchandising idea was ahead of its time.
True, from the old-fashioned hardware store.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That people could get exactly what they wanted and
Yeah,
get
it
up
was
to the
right out
cashier
there.
and pay for it. That's
Right. And
that's a contemporary idea.
that's why we call it quick serve.
So what did you like about working at the Peterson hardware store?
Well, of course, it was a small store, and it was only two of us instead of, like at Cars, maybe we had 15 employees. But it was more personal contact with everybody. And you had the whole store. You had the paint department, you had the pots and pans, you had the hardware, the electrical, and all that.
But the time you started working at Peterson Hardware, the late night to be open was not Saturday anymore, right? That had changed.
It went to Monday nights.
Monday nights, yeah.
Mhm.
So that had changed. That had kind of changed the character of Main Street a
Right.
little bit. What else had changed on Main Street in the time since you had worked at Woolworth and Carr? Just think about, more globally. What had changed on Main Street? What was different?
Well, of course, there's parking meters went in that length of time was one of the biggest things. And of course, the railroad track was right behind us, it was just an alley, and then there was the tracks, and so. But otherwise, and of course, there was. We were on the east end of Main Street. with
Peterson was on the-
Hardware,
Mhm.
so we were down with.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to repeat that. But anyhow, we had Best Electric right next to us. They drawed some trade. We had big furniture store, Bennett McDaniel furniture store across from us. We had a lot of restaurants.
And you whispered the name of a kind of establishment that might have drawn not so savory people.
Well, this is true, but it didn't stop people from trading with us, but
Right.
they were
That was down in that
they
area.
were in our area, yeah.
Then Peterson actually moved as well. It was on
Pardon
the
me?
Peterson Hardware actually moved as well. They were on the east end, and didn't they move farther west?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Later on, Mr. Peterson started the business in 1955, died in, I think, 1962. And I run it with part-time help till 67. Then another fella came in, a farmer from Nevada, had some money and he wanted to get in the business. And we moved up in the middle of the block, which would be 230 Main.
Mm-hmm.
And we were up where the more walking traffic.
More
We were-
foot traffic in that area.
Yes.
Closer to Kellogg.
We were east of Kellogg.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right.
And so that's 1967, you say.
Yep.
And how much longer did you work at Peterson?
I worked till 1985.
You had a long career on Main Street.
Well,
My goodness.
1940 until 85.
Yes.
Outside of the war years, which
Mhm.
I had to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a few years. Yes.
A few, yes. Okay, you had mentioned in that span of time, of course, parking meters came in, and what else happened to affect the retail climate on Main Street?
Well, of course, they took out the train tracks in the freight yards behind us and made a parking lot, which made it a lot better for the people, even with, because the meters back there were longer than they were in the front, so we had a lot of people come in from the back door. And let's see what, of course, we had a lot more foot traffic,
Mm-hmm.
so
Right.
people would see us, and it was very, very good.
In the mid-1970s, malls started to get bigger in the United States, and pretty soon, maybe about a decade later, roughly speaking, big box stores started to come
Yeah.
in. How did that affect you?
That is one reason I retired when I did. I didn't want to retire at 65, but after the box store came in, it took quite a bit of our
Mhm.
business.
It's kind of interesting. The box store kind of turned out to be a combination of the Five and Dime and the hardware store, didn't it? It
Oh,
kind
yes.
of, I mean, the two big places where you'd worked
Yeah, everything
Box stores
I
kind of-
worked- Oh, yes,
took that over.
because people would come in and our business from 67 till about 85, it just kept climbing. And then it tapered off, and I could see the handwriting on the wall, so I thought, well, this is a good time for me to go ahead and retire.
Now, I know you had a short retirement, and then you came back working for a very prominent company in Ames that had been around for a long time.
Yes, it was Ames Funeral Home, which is a block off of Main Street, so it's still Main Street.
And what year did you start working for Adams Funeral Home?
81.
Okay. Well, wait, you retired in 85.
Oh, yeah, 6 years.
Okay, 91.
91.
91.
I'm sorry.
That's
91.
no, that's okay. And so, what'd you do for them?
Well, at first, you might say ushering and at funerals and be down there and nothing else to do. I'd go down for coffee. Then, if something would come up, I would help them do whatever. And after about 4 years, I got the encouragement enough to do a little bit more. I went out on removals, and I did everything except embalming because I couldn't.
Mhm.
Didn't have that's a licensed job, but otherwise I've been in there helping
Mhm.
and help dress them
Mhm.
and put them in the casket and
Mhm.
be a greeter at the door when on visitations. Basically about anything except what they don't let you do unless you're.
Mhm.
It's something that I really enjoyed. I still see people. I saw one in last Wednesday or Thursday. He come in. She says, "Every time we have a funeral, I think of you." Because I was probably helped them more than most of them do, because I was a low man on the totem pole and I could do it.
I think as I listened to your job experience, you must have really liked people.
Well, that's the reason I like that job, because I'm still working with people.
Mhm.
I'd been working with people since I was 10 years old.
Mhm.
On Main Street of the little town of State Center to Ames, Iowa, when it was smaller than it is. And today, I'm still working with people.
Can you, are there any other stories about living in Ames you'd like to tell me? I always give people an opportunity. If I didn't ask a question that you wanted me to ask or you wanted to tell me something, this is your opportunity.
Well, the only thing is, today I'm still working. I'm 13th year with Heartland Senior Center in the nutrition department. I help people with, I help set up for the noon meal, and I call the tables, tell them when to get up to eat, take meals to people that's handicapped, that can't carry them. So I'm still working, may not be on Main Street, but it's with people, which I've done all my life.
Well, Mr. Woodward, thank you very much for telling me your story about living and working in Ames. I appreciate it.
I thank you for having me.